This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
So we start Sefer Melachim and the story about Shlomo Hamelech. It's interesting that Sefer Melachim, although it begins about really the whole topic of Sefer Melachim, at least the first significant amount of prakim, is talking about the king Shlomo Hamelech. But nevertheless, the very, very beginning actually talks about David Hamelech in his older and later years of his life. And this is Shemuel, really, there's two Nevi'im. The original is Shemuel, and then there is Sefer Melachim. The Sefer Shemuel talks mostly about Shaul Hamelech, obviously Shmuel, but Shaul Hamelech. It talks about David Hamelech. All of the experiences of David Hamelech are covered, like majority of his life is covered in Sefer Shemuel. And then once we get to Melachim, it talks about all the kings that existed after David HaMelech, all the way to the point of Tzidkiyahu, which is the point where the first Beit HaMikdash was actually destroyed. So it covers a lot of ground. Now Melachim is divided really into two parts. There's Melachim Aleph, and then there's also Melachim Bet. So we are in Melachim Aleph, and this is what we're going to be learning. It's always important when we learn Navi. This is Navi. Navi means the prophet. Prophet that went ahead and wrote Sefer Melachim. We have to understand this is not just a storybook, or as some people think, a history book. There are a lot of stories. There is a lot of history, and the Torah actually has a sefer devoted to the history of the Jewish people. And that sefer is called Divrei Hayamim. Divrei Hayamim writes about all of the chronicles of Am Yisrael from the times of Moshe Rabbeinu until the times of the destruction of Beit HaMikdash. So why is Sefer Melachim written if it's not a storybook and it's not a history book? Why is it written? It's written in a very specific fashion. And all the Nevi'im are written in this fashion. It's to teach us powerful lessons. Every single story, there are plenty of stories, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of stories. But all of the stories are there for a purpose of teaching us, and so that we are able to use those lessons that great people made mistakes or did correctly and apply those to our lives. So everything that we are trying to learn, every story that we see, we have to think, and Be'ezrat Hashem, B'siyata Dishmaya, with the help of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the job that we're going to do is to analyze how does the story impact me? How does it translate into what I have to do and what I have to be? And there are so many ways. The problem is so many times we don't learn Navi, we don't know what the right approach, the approach of the Torah is. And through the stories and through the lessons of the decisions that these great people made, these kings made, we are able to guide ourselves. It's a guiding light. It's a guiding light to how a person needs to go ahead and act. So let's jump straight in. If the Navi starts with David HaMelech, let us read what it has to say. Hamelech David zaken ba bayamim vaychasuhu ba begadim velo yihamlo. The first thing the Navi tells us is that David HaMelech at this point of his life was very old. He was actually 70 years old. And 70 years, everybody that knows, is the time that a person leaves this world. So I guess he was probably 69 and getting very, very close. He was in his 70th year, let's put it that way. Still 69 years old, but David HaMelech passed away at age 70. And he passed away actually on his birthday as well. And we'll learn more about his passing, but right now it's talking about how he was an old man. Now, I don't know how many of you have grandparents that are 70 years old? It's not that old. 70 years old is not a type of thing that a person should be, in bed. It says David HaMelech was in his room almost all of the time, and he was sitting there and learning Torah and writing his Sfarim of Tehillim and praying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But it was difficult for him to get out and to go about and to do things that most typical kings would do because he was already an old man. But 70 is not that old, so why was David HaMelech so elderly looking and appearing? So we have to understand a few things. David HaMelech, first of all, was a very big general. Even before he became king, he was a general. He fought in many wars, and wars are exhausting. You go days sometimes without eating. You can fight and you can battle, and you're fighting very strong people and powerful armies. And David HaMelech fought a lot of wars before he became king and as he was king. And what happens is the body wears down a lot faster. So he was 70 years old. He might have looked like he was 90 or 100 years old because of the fact that he's been through so much. Plus, if you look at the Midrash says the last 13 years of his life, he had terrible suffering. He was in pain. He was tortured. It says that they'd have to change his pillows because of the infections that he had all over his body. For 13 years, he would cry out of the pain of the infections, and he would turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And why was he in suffering for 13 years? Because of the sin that the Torah identifies that he had with his later-to-be wife, Bathsheba, because he committed a sin, and we're going to learn more about that sin of David HaMelech. For 13 years, he went ahead and did teshuvah. He repented for that sin, and part of the repentance, HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought great suffering on this person who's a tzaddik, who's a very noble man, a very righteous man. For 13 years was suffering. So all of that suffering also took a very heavy toll on David HaMelech and made it very difficult for him even to get up. He was so weak that all of his enemies, David HaMelech didn't just have enemies outside of Eretz Yisrael. He had enemies in Eretz Yisrael. There were Jewish people. Did you know this? There were Jewish people that hated David HaMelech because they thought he was not righteous. They thought he was evil. They thought he was like Esav, Harasha, that he was a murderer, that he went ahead and went against God. And therefore they didn't see him as a tzaddik. People like Achitophel, who thought David HaMelech committed a terrible sin and was not worthy of being king, they rebelled against him. And many other people as well went ahead and did not believe that David HaMelech was righteous. Who knew that David HaMelech was righteous? HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu could look in his heart and see why he does, and not just what he does. So therefore God knew the whole time. Achitophel, who was one of the greatest, wisest people, and the greatest enemies of David HaMelech, he was sure that David HaMelech was a sinner, and that he was righteous. Until when? Until the last day of his life. He commanded his children, and he told them, after he knew he wasn't going to live, he knew for a fact he was going to be killed, he said to his children, the one thing you should not do is do not mess, do not pick a fight with David HaMelech. Hashem imo, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with him. And he understood that because he was a wise man. But all of his years he spent fighting David. So these enemies that hated David HaMelech and thought he was evil, they saw all of this suffering, and what do you think they felt? They felt, he deserves it because he is such a sinner. When is he going to die? They were waiting for David HaMelech to die. They waited for him. And David HaMelech turns to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm so weak, I can't get out of my bed even. But my whole life mission was to teach my son to build Beit HaMikdash. I learned it from the prophet Shemuel. Shemuel took Shaul, sat him down for a good number of days. They spent learning where is the Beit HaMikdash going to be. Because the Torah does not say specifically where is Beit HaMikdash. So they had to learn and they had to analyze and receive in prophecy. And then finally, David HaMelech understood exactly where it needs to be and how it needs to be built. He had all of the information, but his children didn't know. He had to teach it to them. He turns to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in prayer and he says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please, if I remain this week, I won't be able to teach my children about the Beit HaMikdash and how to build it. And I have to do it. Please, all these wrinkles you see on my face, make them go away. Make me rejuvenated and healed from all these sicknesses. And you know what? HaKadosh Baruch Hu heard that prayer. When David HaMelech prayed in the honor of Beit HaMikdash to finish the job he wanted to start, HaKadosh Baruch Hu answered him. And all of a sudden, all of the wrinkles of David HaMelech's face left. And he became younger looking, and he had much more strength. And he was finally able to get up and to teach his son about the building of Beit HaMikdash and how it needs to be done and what needs to be done. All of this, Shlomo Hamelech was then later on tasked with the mission of actually building Beit HaMikdash. At this point, though, the Navi tells us, David HaMelech is Zaken. He's an old man. He fought many wars. He fought rebellions. His own son rebelled against him. Avshalom, his son, went and rebelled against David HaMelech. All of this, David HaMelech became old. He became sick. And there was a problem David HaMelech had. The Navi tells us, David HaMelech, everything that he tried, he couldn't stay warm. I don't know how many people were ever in Yerushalayim, which is where David HaMelech lived. Yerushalayim is very cold, especially in the winter. It's very cold. In some ways, it's even colder than New York. And it's in those times, you have to remember, it's not like today where we have heaters and we feel very comfortable. There weren't any heaters. So David HaMelech just was simply really, really cold. So what did they do? All of his advisors, who were very, very smart people, they said, no problem. Take another blanket. Here, I'll give you a big blanket. I'll give you a bigger blanket. Let's light the fire next to you. Everything that David HaMelech tried to get himself warm at night, he was not able to do it. His body was just so cold all the time. He was shivering. He was in pain from sometimes when the cold is so bad and so long, you're in so much pain from it. And the advisors, they tried everything and nothing worked. The commentaries say, why? Why was David HaMelech having a hard time? It's so unusual. Even older people, usually you put another blanket. Okay, they're a little bit colder. You know, the grandmothers, the grandfathers, they get a little bit colder. So you give him another jacket, you give him another blanket. But why does David HaMelech, nothing he does, 10 blankets, 15 blankets, doesn't matter. He cannot get warm. And the Rashi tells us on the spot, he says, this was a consequence. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was punishing David HaMelech. He was making sure that David HaMelech should make it into Olam Haba, into the future world, free of sin. One of the things David HaMelech did that was wrong, and this is so high level of scrutiny that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had. David HaMelech was being chased. Anybody know which king was chasing David HaMelech? Yeah, Eliyahu? Not Shlomo, close though. Shaul HaMelech. Shaul HaMelech was king before David, and he would chase after David, trying to kill him, even though David HaMelech was his son-in-law. Shaul HaMelech's daughter was given by Shaul to David. Even still, over time, Shaul began hating David and finding to be a threat, and therefore pursuing after him and trying to kill him. So every single place, David HaMelech for 2 years was running away. He couldn't live at home. To go from one place, and then they discovered him, he had to go to another place. He was always on the run. And finally, he had an opportunity where Shaul HaMelech was in the field, chasing after David, trying to kill David. And he was lying there in the field sleeping. All of his soldiers that surrounded him were sleeping, and David HaMelech sees him. Now, he knows that if Shaul HaMelech would be awake right now, he would kill him. Shaul HaMelech would kill David. So David had the right to kill Shaul. And Yoav, his general, said, let's kill him. Now is our chance. And David HaMelech says, absolutely not. This is the king, Mashiach Hashem. He's anointed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Sent Shmuel HaNavi to crown him king. No one is allowed to lay a hand on the king. This is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's chosen king. Even though he was chasing David, David HaMelech didn't lay a finger on Shaul HaMelech's life. But he said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to kill him, but I'm going to rip one of the corners of his garment. Why would he do that? Because when Shaul HaMelech woke up, and David HaMelech said, I had the opportunity to kill you. Look, I don't mean war. I don't mean to hate you. I love you. Here, he showed him the proof. He showed him the garment that he could have killed him. I was right next to you. You see, this is my proof. How do I have this? And he gave it to Shaul to show him that it matches exactly. The tear matches exactly. Now, Shaul Hamelech, for a very short period of time, said, you know what? I did not realize that you actually are my friend. And he said, let go of David. Do not go ahead and harm David. For a very short time, he was on the side of David. He even hugged him. He cried with him. He loved him. He kissed him. He did all these things. And all of a sudden, Shaul Hamelech's mind changed. He changed his heart and started chasing him again. Now you were David Hamelech, you showed amazing restraint. Can you imagine? You could have killed him. He's chasing after you. And instead, what did you do? You spared his life. You showed him that his life was valuable. You're not going to kill him. Now, if that is the case, you would expect Shaul to return the favor. But Shaul Hamelech did not do that. So now the question is, why was David Hamelech suffering that he wasn't able to get warm? Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu to David, look how strict God was with David Hamelech. He said, because you went ahead and you tore the garment, you tore the corner. Now, you know, when you tear a corner of a garment, what is that? What's a corner of a garment? It means he tore the tzitzit of Shaul Hamelech. He tore one of the sides, which means that Shaul Hamelech was wearing tzitzit that was not kasher because David Hamelech took away the opportunity for mitzvah. You showed a lack of care for mitzvah, for clothing, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. From now on, clothing is not going to warm you up. When David Hamelech was older, no amount of clothing was able to warm him up. So much strictness that even though he just laid a little bit of a finger on Shaul Hamelech, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was not happy. Could you imagine if David Hamelech would have killed Shaul? He never would have become king. Yes, Gabriel.
So then why can't fire warm him up?
Oh, that's a very good question. What an excellent question. This is the question the commentaries ask. And Be'ez Hashem, I want you to hold off on that question. It's a really good question. I'm going to get to answering it, hopefully this week. Now, I want to continue a little bit in the story. There's another reason why David Hamelech was not able to get warm. It wasn't just that. There was a time when David Hamelech was in Yerushalayim, and there was a plague in Am Yisrael. And at that time, David Hamelech was praying and praying, and all of a sudden he saw a very scary image. Something very frightening. He saw Malach HaMavet, the angel of death, was standing before him. And when David Hamelech saw him, nobody except for great tzaddikim, nobody is able to see the angel of death, because he's an angel. We are not able to see angels. But David Hamelech was so righteous, he was able to see the Malach HaMavet. And the Malach HaMavet, usually the Malach HaMavet is scared of tzaddikim. But here, David Hamelech became very scared of the Malach HaMavet. He started shivering, and the warmth of his blood, usually what warms a person is the blood of the person that's inside the person. It warms him up because the blood is hot. So that's what creates the word. It all became cold. His whole being, when a person is scared, what happens to him? He's scared stiff. He becomes cold. He's like frozen in his place. And that's what happened to David Hamelech. And that image of the Malach HaMavet also went ahead and made him, from that point on, he was never able to see, especially since the Malach HaMavet has a sword. And his sword, he wiped it on the garment of David Hamelech. He wiped it on, and from then on, all of the garments of David Hamelech were not able to warm him up. Okay, so those are the two main reasons. So what did his advisors suggest for him to do? Nothing was working. They said, we have a solution for you. This is the only thing that's going to solve your problem. They assessed, and they said, you're going to have to find a young unmarried lady. An unmarried lady to warm you up at night. Be together in the same place, under the same blanket, so that you get warmed up at night. And we will do research for you. We will find a righteous young lady that is willing to warm up the king. Because as we know, one of the ways to warm up a person is body heat. The heat of a person is a lot. A person generates heat. It's like you have a heater and you have a person. A person works like a heater. Every single one of us generates heat. So we don't feel it because it's our body, but we are. And therefore, a person who's cold, if he hugs his friend, if they hug each other, they'll be able to warm each other up. And a lot of times in the cold places, like in Russia, what they would do is everybody would gather together, and they would put a blanket in order to warm everybody up, because everybody gives in a lot of heat, a little bit of heat. Everybody has a little bit of heat, and then all of a sudden, nobody's cold anymore. Everybody's hot. So they said, you have to find an unmarried woman. And the commentators say, wait, why can't you have a married woman do this? Why does it have to be unmarried? Why can't she be one of David Hamelech's wives? Because he was married to a lot of wives. So why couldn't they be the ones to do it?
I don't know, but why can't it either be a man? Why does it have to be...
No, so man is not going to work. It's not going to work with a man. It has to be a woman. But the question is, why specifically unmarried? The Gemara says that an unmarried woman has the ability to warm up a person even more than a married woman. So the wives of David Hamelech wasn't even enough. It wasn't even enough to have the wives of David. They had to find a girl that was not yet married in order to be there. Now, if you know, there's another story that is similar but very, very different to this story, where they were looking for a young lady that was not married. Does anybody remember such a story where there was a whole kingdom looking for a woman that was not married to marry the king? The story of? Purim. Exactly. Good job, Eliyahu. The story of Purim, Achashverosh. There was a big difference between what Achashverosh was doing and what David Hamelech was doing. Achashverosh said, okay, I'm looking for a woman. So what did he do? He took all the women of the kingdom and has spent a night with each and every single one. And what do you think the fathers of those girls tried to do? They said he's going to spend a night with every single woman in the kingdom, and then those women are not allowed to get married. According to the law of the Persian Empire, and also in the halakha, once a woman was used by the king for whatever purpose, she's not allowed to get married to another husband. So all the fathers tried to hide their daughters, because they look how he's going ahead and he's living together with everyone. David Hamelech did something very different. He sent people to investigate and to find the right candidate. Only one person was going to be living with David Hamelech. Only one person. And they spent a lot of time to find the most righteous young lady that was willing to sort of sacrifice from herself. Once she's no longer allowed to get married to anybody, so she's sacrificing a lot, that was willing to go ahead and have this honor of warming up the king, warming up David Hamelech. Now, you have to know, in a normal context, this is asur. This is prohibited for somebody to go and even not just in the same room. A person who is married or a person who's single man and a single woman are not allowed to be in the same room together without supervision. They have to have, this is in halakha, this is called yihud. There's a prohibition of a man and a woman that are not husband and wife to be in seclusion. And you know when this actually became prohibited, this yihud with a single girl? In the times of David Hamelech. It was the Beit Din of David Hamelech a few years earlier that prohibited the seclusion of a man with an unmarried woman. And the reason they prohibited was because there was a story where a man, and actually not just any man, the son of David Hamelech, his name was Amnon, decided that he would find himself in the room together with a daughter of David Hamelech from a different wife, not his full sister. Her name was Tamar. And they were in the room together alone, and he did not treat her nicely. Right? And it was very painful for this young lady what he did. And David Hamelech heard about the terrible thing. He said, from now on, no man is allowed to seclude with a single young lady. Certainly a married young lady, that's asur from the Torah, but even a single young lady, it became prohibited because David Hamelech and his Beit Din decreed that it's no longer allowed. So you can ask a question, so how all of a sudden did it become permitted for David Hamelech? The reason is because he went and he said, if this is asur, I'm not going to do it. He went to the Sanhedrin, and the Sanhedrin said, look, to marry another wife that is unmarried, that started off unmarried, that you're not able to do, because you already have 18 wives. And a king is not allowed more than 18 wives. So to marry Avishag, who was the one that they found as the perfect candidate, you can't have 19 wives. So you only have another option. You can divorce one of your wives and then marry Avishag. But that's also not an option, because to divorce a wife is so negative in the eyes of the Torah. The Torah, it's difficult for the Torah to permit a divorce. It takes a crazy situation. And therefore the Chachamim said, it's better that we permit for you the yichud, the seclusion, and not permit for you divorce. Kashin gerushin. Divorce is such a serious thing. The Chachamim preferred to permit the prohibition of yichud. David Hamelech heard what they had to say, and he accepted. He said, okay, if you tell me this is permitted, you're permitting it for me, then that's fine with me. Now David Hamelech, at that point in time, Avishag was introduced to David Hamelech. Now she, we said, was a righteous woman. She was a tzaddiket. So what's the first thing she says to David Hamelech? She says to him, I don't understand, my king. Marry me. Marry me. She didn't know about what the Chachamim told him. So David Hamelech said, I'm sorry, I would, I'm not allowed to. Asur for me, I have 18 wives. So the Gemara in Sanhedrin says, you know what Avishag said back to David Hamelech? She said, no, I don't think that's the reason. I think it's just because you're an old man, and that's why you're not able to marry me. That's why you're not able to be with me. And the David Hamelech said, what? You think that's the reason? You think it's because I'm old? Call to me Bathsheba. Bring over Bathsheba. And he showed her his marriage with Bathsheba and his ability to go ahead and to be a husband. And he showed the strength of what it means to be David Hamelech. And Avishag understood that the reason why he didn't go ahead and do this, he didn't want to marry her, wasn't because he wasn't able to, but rather because it was prohibited. And she got the message, and then she understood that she has a responsibility. She agreed, and every single night they would be in the same bed, but David Hamelech did not touch her. He was so righteous, he was such a tzaddik, because she wasn't his wife, because he wasn't allowed to marry her. He did not touch her. All that happened was she was there to warm him up, and that is it. He did not go anywhere further than that, which is the righteousness of this man, of this David Hamelech. This is the first part of the Navi that it talks about. Yes?
But did it work?
It worked. It worked. The Chachamim knew that it was going to work, and indeed it worked. As the Torah says, "Vayvakshu na'ara yafa bechol gevul Yisrael vayimtzeu." They found this beautiful woman. She was beautiful. She was physically beautiful, and she was spiritually beautiful, and David Hamelech did not lay a finger on her. Pasuk He tells us of a very interesting incident that happened during this time. I don't know how many of you know who Adoniah is. Adoniah was the son of David Hamelech. Now, a little bit of background. David Hamelech had 3 old boys, the oldest of his children, that already died. The first one was Amnon. Amnon was the oldest of his children, and Amnon was killed. As I said, he had the whole incident with Tamar. Avshalom, who was the full brother of Tamar, heard about what happened and how Amnon treated her. And Avshalom was so not happy with Amnon that he killed Amnon. He killed his own half-brother. Killed him because he wasn't happy with how he acted with his sister. Amnon was killed. David Hamelech had a second son. His name was Kil'av. And Kil'av was a tzaddik like you can't imagine. He was one of the 4 people that never ever sinned. Now, Kil'av was righteous, he was great, but he did not live a long life. He lived a very short life. And therefore he was also, he passed away. He's also not in the picture. The next is Avshalom. He was the 3rd oldest. Avshalom was the 3rd. And we know what happens with Avshalom. He rebels against his father. And who kills him? The general of David Hamelech, Yoav ben Tzeruya, kills Avshalom. Even though David Hamelech didn't want him to do it, he did it anyway. So now Avshalom is out of the picture. Who is the 4th oldest son? Adoniah. Adoniah, the Torah references him both ways. We'll call him Adoniah. Adoniah was the fourth son of David HaMelech. Now you could imagine, David HaMelech is king. David HaMelech is old. What is Adoniah thinking in his head as the oldest son? I'm going to become king. I'm handsome. I'm a Talmid Chacham. I know Torah. I'm very religious. I'm the oldest. I should be the next king. So what Adoniah begins to do is begins during the life of David HaMelech to act very kingly. And the Torah tells us, why does Adoniah do all of this? Because his father, never in his life did his father atzavo, velo atzavo aviv miyamav. His father never, ever rebuked Adoniah. Whatever Adoniah wanted to do, David HaMelech never protested. And I want to tell you, young kids, I want you to understand, sometimes you might get punished by your parents. And you feel, why does Abba not like me? Why does Abba punish me? Why does Ima making me have a hard time? And you have to understand, sometimes it's important for parents to punish their children. Even in situations where they didn't do anything wrong. Let me tell you a hidush. Reb Chaim Kanievsky says that, do you think that if Adoniah did something wrong, David HaMelech wouldn't have put him in his place? He would have. Adoniah never did anything wrong. So David HaMelech didn't not punish him. There simply wasn't anything to punish him. He always lived his life correctly. However, the Gemara tells us that even when the son is perfect, it's still your responsibility to a little bit, not too much, but a little bit, to rebuke him. Rebuke him. So he gets used to being rebuked. Rebuke, even a little bit, because that straightens out the person. Otherwise, a person becomes spoiled. He's not used to people telling him what to do. So always, you have to understand as children, that sometimes Abba will tell you what to do, sometimes Abba will punish you, and it looks like he's not being nice to you. He really is. It's so that we can develop. David HaMelech never punished Adoniah, and therefore Adoniah made mistakes. When he got older, he did things that were wrong. And one of the things that he did was he tried to become king. Because he said, I'm the oldest, and therefore I deserve the kingship. So what did he start doing? He started gathering people, 50 runners. You know who would have runners run before him? Only a king was allowed to have people running before him. 50 people. Adoniah took these people. It says that the palm of their foot, because they would run without shoes, there were thorns. So what they did is they removed a lot of the nerves from the bottom of the foot so that they won't feel it, and they'll be able to even run on thorns or rocks or all these things. And they removed a certain part of their body so that they won't run slowly. They were able to run really fast. 50 people. He did this too, to show that he's becoming the next king. Adoniah went and acted in such a fashion. So the king, David HaMelech, doesn't know about this. What did we say? Where was David HaMelech during all of this? He was in bed. He was sick. He was old. He didn't know what Adoniah was doing. And Adoniah didn't really care if David HaMelech knew, because he said, what is David HaMelech going to be able to do? He's going to lead a battle? He's too old. I am deserving of being king. Now, if you think about it, Adoniah sounds like he's saying a good point. Isn't he the oldest? Doesn't he deserve to be king? How is Adoniah supposed to know he's wrong? You want to know? There's a secret over here. David HaMelech and all of his children that were worthy of being king, the one that was destined to be king, David HaMelech had a crown. And this crown wasn't like your typical crown. It had a rod in it, like a bar, in the crown. And anybody that tried to put the crown on their head, it wouldn't fit properly. It would be tilted, it wouldn't fit properly. Only the person who's destined to be king, every one of David HaMelech's children and David HaMelech had a special groove in their head. The crown sat perfectly. So you know what Adoniah did? He said, let me see, am I deserving of being king? Am I enough of a tzaddik? Am I a person who's deserving of being king? Adoniyahu takes the crown when no one's looking, puts it on his head. And what does he realize? It doesn't fit. He quickly takes it off. It doesn't fit. So he knows. So now you ask a question. If he knows that he's not meant to be king, why would he do this? I thought he was a tzaddik. He rationalized. He said, you want to know why it doesn't fit me? Because my father is still alive. Since my father is still alive, then it's not going to fit. It's understandable. David is king. It's not yet my time to be king. But let me start the preparations already. By the time David Hamelech passes away, surely the crown will fit me. This is how he rationalized that he is worthy of becoming king. He should have known it's a sign from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not your opportunity to be king. There already was a prophecy by Natan HaNavi. Natan HaNavi told David HaMelech and told Bathsheba. He said to them, no one but Shlomo HaMelech is going to be king. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has revealed to me, Shlomo benech imroch acharayich. He will rule. And therefore there is no permission for anybody to take the kingship from the hands of Shlomo HaMelech. B'ezrat Hashem, next week we'll continue what happens with Adoniyahu and what happens with Shlomo HaMelech and who wins the battle for the kingship. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.